Welcome to this session on competitor analysis and competitive strategy. So, why look into competition? Well, simply because if we want to win a competition, then it actually helps to know who is our competitor. So therefore, it's a good idea to know the strengths and the weaknesses of the competitors. And therefore, knowing their strengths and weaknesses, we might be able to say some qualified about their reactions. So therefore, if we want to do that, we should probably have to take a closer look at the competitors, and therefore the idea about competitor analysis is the answer. So, what are the steps in analyzing the competitors? Well, these steps here in analyzing the competitors are 5, and we have the first one: identification of competitors, competitor strategy and objectives, competitors marketing mix, competitors strengths and weaknesses, and competitors reaction patterns. Now we will take a closer look at these steps one by one, but please note that we have to identify competitors. We cannot make analysis of anyone unless we know who they are. So let's move on to the next step, namely identification of competitors. There are different approaches, but one of the very ordinary approaches is that we talk about substitution. And substitution means that can we substitute our product with something else? Basically means, can the customers substitute our product with something else? So in this case, let's take it. We have what we call brand competition. This is in place when we have, for example, identical products and more or less the same customers and the same price. And one example of this is Coca-Cola and Pepsi. As you can see, the substitution here, they can be directly substituted, and therefore they are in quite heavy competition with each other. The second part is industry competition. This is where we have more or less identical products. That could be soft drinks. So it's not Coca-Cola and Pepsi. It's also other cola products and other soft drink products. And therefore, in this case, you'll see that our number of competitors have actually expanded. So in this first one up here, the brand competition, we have very few, and here at the next level we have more competitors. Now the third one, form competition. We could actually take a look at competitors who's offering products that fulfill the same need, maybe the need for being thirsty or for the need for having something to drink. So that could be beverages. And the last one is about the generic competition. That is where all products are fighting for the same resources that the customers have. So these 4 forms of substitution is very important to have in mind when we are trying to identify competitors, because at what level do we want to identify competitors? And as you can see here, we have few if we have brand competition, and we have more and more competitors the more we go to the bottom here and have generic competition. Now that was the identification of competitors. Let's move on to the next step. What about competitor strategy and objectives? Well, as we have here, that will mean positions in customers' mind. What about distribution channels? What about the media they are using? Basically, it's about how do they compete in the marketplace, and what is it that, for example, customers think about those competitors. Let's take a little example here. As you can see in this little figure, we have here distribution, which can be intensive, and intensive distribution means that we are trying to distribute our product to all the different outlets that it's possible, because we probably expect that the customers would like to have easy access to our product. At the other end of distribution, we have exclusive distribution. We might assume that customers are willing to travel a lot to get to our retailers or to get hold of our product. So we have different kinds of distributions. We have exclusive, selective, and intensive. The other thing here, the other dimension, is assortment, as we can see right here. It can be a wide assortment, it can be a narrow assortment. Now, let's take this example here with Bang & Olufsen, a Danish company producing hi-fi electronics and television sets in the exclusive end. And they actually have quite a narrow assortment. They do not have a lot of different varieties in their assortment. And they are quite exclusive in their way of being in the market. Then we also have other competitors. And we have Sony, for example. They have a more selective choice of distribution, and they also have a more broad assortment than Bang & Olufsen. And then we also have companies with quite wide assortments here, big electronic corporations, and quite an intensive distribution, which means that we can here see that we have three different kinds of companies with three different kinds of strategies. For example, Bang & Olufsen with a narrow assortment and an exclusive distribution strategy, compared to Sony, which have quite a selective, maybe even a more intensive distribution strategy and a more wide assortment. This helps us to understand that maybe Sony is not that intrigued by Bang & Olufsen because they have their own place and more out into different kinds of distribution channels. They have a broader assortment. They may also have different kinds of target groups. They might have different positions in customers' heads. So trying to draw these kind of pictures here, these figures on what are the strategies of our competitors, help us to understand what are they and what are they going to do in the future. Now the next step, competitors' marketing mix. We know that the marketing mix consists of the 4 P's, and that's when we are talking about the physical product here, consisting of the product, the price, the place, and the promotion. And if we are adding 3 more, we get the 7 P's, and those 7 P's, we use those for the service, and there we add the physical evidence, the processes, and the people. And these 4 P's and 7 P's are important to investigate, because when we investigate what the competitors do with their product, with their price, with their place, with their promotion, with where they are placing themselves, the processes they use, the people they hire, the way they are organizing themselves, when we investigate those 4 or 7 P's, we get to know a lot about our competitors, and that knowledge can actually tell us something about the overall strategy that they are using. So a thoroughly analysis of competitors' marketing mix help us to understand what do they do and how we can maybe win the competition. Now the competitors' strengths and weaknesses. Competitors and also ourselves, when we have resources and talk about resources, they are the foundation for the strengths and weaknesses that we have. Now looking at a competitor's resources, a competitor have, just like anybody else, tangible resources like buildings, production facilities, cars, tables, chairs. They have intangible resources. Maybe they have patents, maybe they have a brand, they might have positions in customers' heads. And they have capabilities, means skills and competences with the company. And we need to remember that when we investigate those resources, then we can actually figure out that if we attack areas here of great importance to the competitor, he will probably fight back. So therefore, understanding the resources and understanding the strengths and weaknesses also help us to understand the reaction patterns, which is basically the next point here. And we have 4 issues. Competitors often have one of these. They can be laid back, they can be very selective on what they fight against, they can be a tiger, they more or less fight fiercely for their survival, and the stochastic competitor not knowing what they are reacting upon. So these steps: identification, strategy, marketing mix, strengths, weaknesses, reaction patterns, they are the steps. Now let's move on to investigate the position of competitors, because that will help us to understand something about where we should prioritize our own efforts. To understand the position of competitors, we need to perform a customer value analysis. And we need to remember that it's not only about understanding the position of competitors, we should also try to understand the position of our own company. Now, what are the steps in understanding the position of competitors? Well, we have to perform this customer analysis, value analysis. So we identify major attributes that customers value. We assess the quantitative importance of each attribute. We assess the company's performance on each attribute. We assess the competitor's performance. We examine company performance against a chosen competitor or maybe a couple of competitors. And then we monitor the customer values over time. So let's take these one at a time. First, identify major attributes that customers value. Okay. This means, what may customers value? They might value price. It could be low, high. They might value quality. They might value service. They could value flexibility, a brand name. There are lots of different things that customers value. And probably we would have to get some help from our analysis of buying behavior in order to understand fully what is it that customers value. So how do we find out? Well, we use personal interviews, we could use group interviews, we could use questionnaires, we could use observations of customers, simply in order to figure out what is it that customers value. So, step number 2, assess the quantitative importance of each attribute. Let us give an example here. We have customers, and if we give a question to customers to value the attributes, we could formulate it like this: how important is the attribute to you on a scale from 1 to 5, where 5 is very important and 1 is not important? Here, let's imagine that we are asking the customers about the attribute called price. So we would formulate the question: how important is price to you on a scale from 1 to 5, where 5 is very important and 1 is not important? Like this. So here we have the dimensions. We have the customer can choose between 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, where 5 is very important and 1 is not important in this particular case. So we have asked the customer, and the customer have answered with a mark on 1, indicating that the customer says, well, it's not important to me. Okay, let's move on. We might ask a second question here. We might ask for quality, and we would then ask, how important is the quality to you on a scale from 1 to 5, where 5 is very important and 1 is not important? And here the customer answers 3. And in this way we can detect the importance that the customers assess to each of those attributes. We could add another one. We could add service, and here we see that the customer has evaluated that to 2. And we could look at flexibility, and we can see the customer here values flexibility quite a lot. because the customer has said that it's a 5, so it's very important to the customer. Okay, and then brand name, a name of 4 in this particular case. Good. So far, so good. If we have a lot of respondents then, over here, imagine this is the answers from just one respondent. If we have lots of respondents, then we can make calculations of average, means, standard deviations, etc. So if we have 100 or 1000 respondents answering the same question on price, quality, service, flexibility, brand name, then we get maybe an indication of this is the importance. It could be 1.5, for example, when we calculate the average. So in this way, we are able to indicate the importance that the customers rate each of these attributes. And this is quite interesting, because when we have the customers' importance rating of those attributes, we can start to compare those with the performance of both our company and our competitors. So let's try to take a closer look at that situation. So the performance means here, when we assess the company's performance on each attribute, that means our own company. How do we perform on these attributes that we have just investigated? For example, here we ask the question, how do you rate the performance of, and then the attribute on a scale from 1 to 5, where 5 is very high and 1 is not at all. And here we have the same attributes again, price, quality, service, flexibility, brand name. And here the customers are answering the question, how do you rate the performance of price on a scale from 1 to 5, where 5 is very high and 1 is not at all. And here our company, with the red crosses here, the customers, they have rated our company to perform 5 on price, which is very good. Quality, we perform with 1, which is not at all. Service, we perform with 3, flexibility 5, and brand name 4. So, is this good or bad? Well, when we see what customers actually value, we simply put in those marks from before, and those black crosses here, they indicate what it is customers value. And we can see right here on price, customers don't care about price, and they perform us to score quite high on price. So that is probably not the best possible situation. Here we can see that the customers, they are valuing quality with the black X in the middle, but they also rate our company to perform quite low on quality. So probably not the best situation for us. Looking at flexibility and brand name, we are apparently doing quite okay, because we are performing good and in accordance with what the customers actually value. So we perform good on price, maybe, but do customers value it? And we do not perform on quality, but do customers value? Now, the fourth step. What about the competitors? Let's try to assess the competitors' performance on each attribute. Same thing, once again, we have our attributes. We are asking the same kind of question, and this time the customers are rating the competitors, and therefore these blue crosses are the competitors' performance according to the customers. And we remember that it is the customers in the end who decide whether they would like to buy or not, and therefore the position inside the the customers' heads are quite important to us in order to understand what's happening. So we have here a full overview, more or less, that the red cross represent our company, the blue cross or X represent our competitors, and the black one is what customers actually value. Now you try to figure out which one, the competitor or our company, is actually doing best. Did you find out? Well, I think you could take a second look if you want to. Then make sure to monitor the customer value over a continuous basis. Means on a continuous basis seems over time, because it might change what customers actually value. Now, this analysis of competitors gives us information on what the competitors have for resources, their strategies, and their position. And this is valuable when we are going to choose our competitive strategies, when we are going to choose how we would like to position ourselves, how we would like to grow, and make decisions in general about our survival in the marketplace. So choosing a competitive strategy based on competitor analysis and customer analysis and resource analysis leads us to this one, that we can choose between 4 different competitive strategies: market leader, market challenger, market follower, or niche. And it all depends on what do we want and what can we become. The analysis will help us deciding that. And that ends the session on competitor analysis.